Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Change the Why podcast with Pedro Goncalves and Mr. Daryl Jace. Daryl, how you doing?
Hey man, how's it going?
Good,
How's it going?
good. So, man, today we have a very special guest, and I actually didn't tell you what I'm going to say about you two guys, but I'm very excited about this session because you two have been the most influential people in the last 5 years of my poker career. So
Cool.
it's going to be something pretty interesting. So yeah, let's call Andrew, Mr. Andrew Brokos from the Thinking Podcast. Let's see if he's there. Calling. Andrew?
Hello.
Hey man, how you doing?
Very good. How have you been?
Very, very good. We got Daryl on the mic too. Daryl, you
Hi,
there?
Daryl.
Hey, what's up, Andrew?
Good to talk
Cool.
to you again.
Yeah.
You guys know each other, right?
Yeah, I sort of. I've been on his podcast before. We make videos for the same site and
Perfect.
probably tweeted at each other a few times.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know him as well as I would like to, but here's my chance.
Exactly, yeah. I would just like to talk a little bit about the information that I found about you in basically your tournament successes, like your poker successes, so that people know who you are and what you achieved, or do you want to talk about that?
I think it would be better if you did.
Okay, so I'm just reading out stuff that I found on Tournament Poker Edge, which was the first time that I heard about Andrew Brokos also, and which got me to basically contact you. That was back in 2013, if I
Yeah,
remember
I
correctly.
thought it had been about 2 years.
Yeah, like October 2013 was when I started MTTs. Okay, so what did I found? You won a $2,000 two-day F-Tops event.
Wanted to win that one. So jealous. Favorite tournaments.
Yeah, it has to be a tough field also. Jesus. And you got pretty deep in the VSOP main event. Five times in the money, three times top 100, right?
That's right.
I mean, that's pretty crazy in itself. You mainly play Scoop and W Coop events, I would assume. It says here, and you get
Nowadays I do, just because since
okay.
I live in the U.S., I only travel a couple times a year to play online, so I do it for Scoop and WCoop.
Yeah, man. Like it just looks like all kind of deep fields. I mean, I'm posting this information that I'm reading here to the people out there so they can read it later. But yeah, man, what got added to this? So basically, there's no like new information about you besides that. So
No, I mean I haven't been playing as many tournaments the last couple of years. And I haven't, the last few years have not been my best performances in the World Series or W Coop or Scoop. I mean, actually, I think I had a pretty decent W Coop in terms of this most recent one. I had a really high in the money. I think I was in the money in something like a third of the tournaments that I played, but none of them really turned into deep runs. But I mean, that's how tournament poker goes. So especially if you only play a couple dozen in a year, it's pretty easy to have a few dry years in a row. But I've been playing a lot more cash lately.
yeah, and I've watched you I talked to you right before the Scoop 2014, and I asked you about your schedule and all that stuff, and you said, yeah, I'm gonna arrive in Canada, right? Is something like next week, and I was like, hey, okay, cool, I'm gonna rail you. So what happened then? The first night you final tabled the 109 Sunday rebuy, right?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, he's not winning a Scoop event, but he's at least final tabling one of the toughest Sunday tournaments.
Yeah, that got things off to a nice start.
Right.
Although I did feel bad because I sold a package for some of the larger buy-in Scoop events, and so I felt kind of bad because a lot of people who had a stake in some of the Scoop events that I was playing were sweating me playing generally. I felt kind of bad for them watching me run deep and have a pretty big score in a tournament that they didn't have a piece of.
Oh man, yeah, but I mean, you're not doing it intentionally, so everybody understands that. So,
I mean, how good. I don't know if you've played. Yeah, you've played on other people's money before, right?
oh yeah, I mean, I'm selling packages also, and
That's
last
what I
week,
thought.
yeah, I won a Sunday tournament, and it was not part of the package. And I just played it because I busted everything else.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I know.
but yeah, I mean, there's always, especially when it's like people who you know and like who are buying the action from you. I always want them to, not just, I mean, from a kind of business perspective, I want satisfied customers, but also just when it's friends and stuff, I would like them to have more success than they've seen so far.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the major things, you two guys are basically the guys that made me a winning player into MTTs. So this for me is a very special.
Be nothing without us.
Sorry? What?
So you'd be nothing without us.
Absolutely. I mean, in MTTs, I basically was the guy before I met Andrew. I was like, I'm the best. I can just destroy MTTs and I can destroy turbo tournaments. And then I met Andrew and I was like, okay, I'm the worst. I have no clue about this game. And Andrew gave me homeworks. He gave me articles to read. And I was like, oh man, I can never understand poker. This is too much. No, and and then I met Daryl and basically from there everything took off. But it completely started with you, Andrew. And was just absolutely
okay, like Andrew was the one who broke my spirit, and then Daryl built me back up again.
Well, I won good money when I met you. Like right after meeting you, I think I won 2 UPT packages, and I got pretty deep in a bunch of tournaments. So I always contacted you.
I remember you showing some progress while we were working together.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, man, what I would really like to talk about is that you two guys share one thing. It's that you are very generous people. You're like sharing a lot of information. You are, helping a lot of people, and especially in your podcast. I would really like to talk about. And wait, Daryl had a question actually there. Daryl, are you there? You lost connection, right? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, my daughter pulled out the internet. Pretty standard.
Yeah, I was just saying that. Yeah, he always has these problems. And Daryl had a question about that. What was that? The nonprofit.
Oh yeah, I was wondering. Have you heard about the X Prize and what are your thoughts on it? The Global Learning X Prize.
No, I thought the X Prize, or I know the X Prize in the context of the space race sort of thing. I don't know about the Global Learning one.
Yeah, the Global Learning one is starting now. It's so basically illiterate kids in Africa creating an app that teaches them how to read basically from scratch and numeracy. And the team who can do that gets their app delivered to tens of millions of kids in Africa, and they get $11 million, something like that. And top 5 get $1 million.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool project. I was just wondering if you were thinking about that or interested in that, or.
I'm certainly not thinking of participating. My knowledge of programming or app development or anything like that would hold me back, even if I had some sort of brilliant idea for teaching people to read, which also I do not.
Yeah, I don't think you need like a background in programming. There's the teams are going to be huge. I don't think there's just one guy who just I'm going to do this all myself,
Gotcha.
So you'd probably join a team 20, 30 people if you're interested. But I guess maybe a bit more esoteric of a question is do you think math can be taught in a one size kind of fits all app to kids? And by math, I guess I mean functional math, if you know what I mean.
Well, I like that term that you used, numeracy, because that's really a big difference between memorizing times tables versus actually knowing how to think practically in terms of numbers. And I think certainly we see in America, I imagine most adult Americans are pretty decent at basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, to some extent division. But I think a lot of them are very, very poor. Even in poker we see this, and I think poker does a lot to teach people some numeracy. But people's ability to actually use math in practical ways and do things like assess risk or use probabilities in their daily lives, I think a lot of people are really poor at that kind of thing, or conceptualizing very large or very small numbers and all that sort of stuff. That actually strikes me as something that an app would be much better at than teaching facts is sort of teaching people how to use that kind of information. Like that seems, and I mean, essentially, I feel like I and a lot of people I know have learned a lot of that from playing a game, which is poker. But I think that a game that's like specifically designed to teach that kind of stuff, I could imagine being pretty successful at that. I mean, I don't know if I would say one size fits all exactly, but it is the sort of thing that I think could an app would be pretty well suited to teaching, which might not be true for something like times tables, although maybe it is. I don't know.
Yes, that's a good point because didn't go to school, but I learned very functional math. By functional, I mean I can use math to improve my game. I know how to use control my ranges or understand how often someone folds, or often this race has to work comparing two lines, the EV of it, quantifying shit. And I learned it through poker, but the problem is I really like poker. If I had to learn numeracy through making dresses, that I probably wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious how people are going to solve this problem of finding a common thread between everyone, because I think with writing and learning how to read, it's very human. Everybody loves stories. I think you would agree. You know what I mean? And everyone can kind of create their own stories. But how do you make an app that everybody likes, a math app that everybody likes? Teaches literacy. Anyways, probably a bit too esoteric of a question.
but maybe the right guy to ask, because I mean, Andrew, you're writing a lot and you're thinking a lot, it seems.
Yeah, those are probably the two things that I do most often. Probably in the reverse order. A lot of time thinking, and I enjoy writing a fair bit as well.
Can you do thinking when I compare myself when I'm trying to write out my thoughts and then just think on my own, I just feel like a complete idiot when I'm doing the latter, just trying to think on my own. Do you have
without putting things into writing?
Yeah, without putting things on paper.
I actually find a lot of times I do think in terms of what I'm going to write. One example is while I'm playing poker, I'm often thinking about the blog post that a particular hand or experience is going to produce at the same time that I'm playing it. And it's kind of the way that I process some experiences now. I think I've started to kind of put it through the lens of writing and how will I tell other people about this? How will I communicate this to other people?
Is that your peak time poker A game when you think about the podcast while playing, or does that at all distract you?
I mean, I do think it kind of forces you to play a little bit better if you have to think about explaining your play, because it's pretty easy to do things that are motivated by tilt or frustration or whatever else, and so being in a situation where you have to say, okay, how am I going to explain this one to either the podcast reader or the blog readers or the backers? How am I going to tell people why I just shoved here? Making sure that you actually have it. And it's not that I'm averse to taking risks, in those sorts of situations. I'm definitely not, but I think it's a good way to kind of check yourself to say, am I going to be able to give people a cogent explanation of why I did this, or is this just going to look spewy? Or it's more knowing that it's going to look spewy, and then saying, can I explain this in a way that will at least convince people that it wasn't, even if it didn't work, that it wasn't necessarily a spew, that there was sound logic behind it. And I think being able to assess, am I actually constructing a good argument here, or am I just, finding justifications for making stupid play? I do find that pretty helpful.
Do you also speak it out loud? Do you have a active discussion while you play about these things with yourself? Because this is something that I tell my students when they start out, thinking about hand ranging and about hand reading. I tell them just speak to yourself, just say out loud what you think, because very often your thoughts, you will just get lost in your thoughts, and when you speak it out loud, it keeps you in a line. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah, I do think that's a good idea. I can't say I do it too often. The one thing that I used to do, I mean, nowadays when I play online, I've usually, I'm traveling by myself, but it used to be my girlfriend was often around when I was playing online. And on the rare occasions when I was vocalizing something, if I was, pondering over somebody who's gone all in and I'm thinking about whether I should call them and I'm kind of agonizing and I start talking out loud, she would usually just say if you have to think about it, it's probably a fold or something like that. She knew enough to say if what are you doing during this time? You're probably just constructing rationalizations for making a bad call.
Is she good at poker too? Does she understand what you're saying there, or is it just that?
I like to say that she probably has the highest ratio of poker knowledge to hands played of anyone in the world. Because I think a lot of poker players, girlfriends, wives, whatever, do at least a little bit get into actually playing the game, or their boyfriends, spouses will buy them into small stakes tournaments or whatever. But she really has expressed has actually expressed disinterest in playing, but she does have a pretty decent idea she's often in the room when I'm doing coaching, so she overhears stuff, or sometimes I'll explain stuff to her that happened, and she reads my the emails from the WSOP and all that kind of stuff. So I think that she understands some fairly high-level poker concepts in theory. I think it would be a disaster if she actually tried to sit down and play. But she knows what's going on.
A guy I coach streams off of Twitch, and that kind of just focuses him to like vocalize every single hand.
I've been tempted to try that. It seems like a lot of people are having fun with that now.
Yeah, Jason Somerville's doing really well with it.
I know about his.
It's ridiculous. He said in a video that he had over 3 million people watching him over Twitch. I
know that Twitch is super popular. I mean, even outside, like more in the video game side of things. But I guess there's enough people who at least have like a passing interest in poker, and he seems like he's very good at making not just for people who are like real poker nerds, but just kind of making it entertaining for anyone.
Yeah, and that's what he mentions a lot. He says that poker got like very, very serious. Like people are talking too much about the math behind it and too little about, remember that those WPT tours where Vince Van Patten and who's that other guy? I always forget his name.
Mike Sexton.
Mike Sexton, yeah, exactly. And they were just, splashing around, screaming, shouting. Everybody was excited, and half of the room didn't even understand who won, who lost. No one understood that a flush beats the straight. No one had a clue, but everybody was excited.
I remember Mike Sexton like tripping out anytime someone put in a C-bet with air. It was just like the greatest move to him ever.
Yeah, and he was like, wow, he put out the C-bet. And you said at home, oh my God, how could he do that? He didn't have a hand.
He's got absolutely nothing, and he's just bet 1/4 of the pot.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to admit that Jason Somerville is absolutely right, that those times are lost. If you think about poker commentating on TV now, everything is about, percentages, tendencies, how good a player is. Everybody's super focused. I don't know.
I laugh at that stuff. That stuff really just inspired me to really get good at poker. I don't know, just seeing like, Gus Hansen and Phil Ivey get deep in like WPTs and crushing. I don't know. This is something like I really aspired to, and I think it definitely pushed me harder.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Man, these guys are so consistent. It's crazy.
Yeah, even though it was lame, it was still like, when I was like 14, 15 watching it was just like the coolest thing.
Absolutely. I mean, when I watched your guys' videos on Tournament Poker Edge, I just thought these guys are completely on a different planet. These guys are not humans. Like how consistent you could get at poker was not. I think a lot of people that I talk to when I say Andrew Brokos, they're like, oh my God, isn't that guy who got in the money 5 times in the WSOP main event? How do you do that? This is just not possible. He can read souls. And I'm like, yeah.
This is what I wanted to ask you. Like, seems like your videos are probably the best on the site. Although I haven't watched, just based on reviews and comments and stuff like that. How do you use like the stuff you learned in education? Your experience with that to make good videos.
Well, first, thank you. I guess it's a lot of it is just being able to explain the same thing a couple of different ways, or being able to think about what is going to be difficult for other people to understand. And so, I mean, my background in education is, you mentioned before, a nonprofit organization, and I've worked a lot in high schools, but not just with high school students. I mean, this was it was like a competitive debate league, so it's kind of kids who participated in competitive argumentation, the same way you might have a football team. These schools had a debate team, but so I was teaching not just the students, but I would also be teaching their teachers, the coaches, like how to coach debate. I'd be teaching adult volunteers how to judge debate rounds. So I was teaching a lot of different types of people, and I think that's part of what helps too, learning to work with a lot of different types of audiences and that sort of thing. But mostly I think it's a matter of being able to like anticipate what kinds of things are going to be tricky for your listeners to understand, and trying to strike that balance between what's interesting and surprising to me, or what I feel like needs explanation, versus what people watching the video are likely to think when they see it, and trying to flag certain things, make sure that you're avoiding certain misunderstandings. Because I mean, there's a lot of people who like make good plays, what turn out to be good plays for the wrong reasons, and I think making sure that you're saying to them like, the reason I'm folding this isn't just because this guy bet big. It's not just like always fold one pair when somebody makes a huge bet. Like, that's not the lesson I want you to take away from this. Like, let's think a little bit more specifically about what is it that he did to indicate that he actually has a strong hand.
Yeah, I definitely do the former, like just explaining things that I find like interesting to me, and they'll just be like really esoteric and like just kind of random, tangential,
I mean, for what it's worth, I enjoy your videos for that purpose, but I probably am a little closer to you in terms of the things that I find interesting in poker than some people maybe.
Yeah, I definitely think I can tell everybody that this is absolutely true. Like, you two guys are very similar, absolutely. Like, one thing that I learned from your coachings, Andrew, is that the hand reading stuff is just phenomenal. Like, really, it's just the best that I've seen out there. Like Daryl just said. I mean, I showed your videos. I mean, I recommended so many people to Tournament Poker Edge because of your videos. Sorry, Daryl, but. And they all watched your videos, and after that they came to me and they were like, okay, it sounds very interesting what he said, and it sounds very simple, but I don't understand a single thing. They just break down their hands while they're alone, in the way that you explain it, and when they listen to you saying it, it sounds reasonable and super simple, but when they do it alone, they just can't deal with it. Do you have anything, like any sort of advice or anything that could help them?
I've been tempted to go back and try to like redo those hand reading videos or do a supplement or something. Not that I think I did a bad job the first time around, but I do have some ideas now. I mean, people have said to me like, here are some, or I've seen misunderstandings that people have come away with, because it's something, as you said, for my coaching students, I give a lot of homework, and often it involves watching those videos. So then I get a lot of chances to see, after people have watched those videos, what have they actually taken away from them, and what do I still need to correct when we work together after watching those videos. So, I have some ideas about things that I would kind of like to have in there that would maybe help to avoid some misunderstandings people have taken away from them. I suppose the biggest thing is I think I focused, like, part of the point of that, I introduced this kind of 3-category structure for reading hands, which is, and the whole idea is, I think the idea of hand reading is a little misleading. Like, usually the goal is not to figure out exactly what hand your opponent has. I think most people focus too much on that, and it's just trying to figure out, is his range predominantly very strong hands where he's trying to put all the money in? Is it predominantly marginal hands where he's trying to get to showdown cheaply? Or is it predominantly very weak hands that have little chance of winning the pot? And figuring out, exactly what he has is not really the most important thing. And so I think, because I try to give examples of, what would count as a monster hand in this case, what would count as a marginal hand in this case. I think people are still a little too focused. Like, they think that they still have to be thinking in terms of specific combinations. And the point I wanted to make is that you don't actually have to do that to have a reasonable amount of success with hand reading. It's still the point that you would like to get to eventually, but there's a lot that you can accomplish without really trying to put your opponent on an exact hand.
Yeah, absolutely. What really struck me about your coaching, and I really highly encourage everybody to take a look at thinkingpoker.net, is that when I looked at your coaching package, something that you said, let me just take a look at it. This is so funny. Have you ever taken a look at it, Daryl, on his site, what he says there?
I remember it being different than everybody else's.
Exactly.
That's all I remember. Yeah.
It says, stop monkeying around, start thinking. And I was like, oh my god, he's so right.
I should give credit. My girlfriend wrote that line.
No, man, but it really, like, when I took a look at this, and you say that I give you homeworks, I give you videos, I give you articles and all those things, I thought, man, he's so much more prepared than any other poker coach I've ever seen in poker.
To be honest, I've never actually had coaching myself, and it's not that I don't think coaching has the potential to be useful. Obviously, it's more like I kind of worry that I don't trust that like anyone else would be as diligent about it as I am. So like I feel like if there were a way of like hiring a more talented version of myself as a coach, I would want to do that. But I'm concerned that so many people are are like not very invested in the actual teaching side of things. Like no matter how good they are at poker, they're just like not really trying that hard to on like they're just sort of like, well, it's a privilege to be able to, you know, watch me talk while I play, and you should feel grateful for that.
I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
that's what frustrates me a lot about the coaching thing and MTTs. A lot of people just don't know anything about education. They're like, oh, I'm going to be a teacher or a coach. You know, some people are just like naturally really good at it, you know, but I don't know. I think like the vast majority of people just have no experience in how to do that or anything. And if anyone's looking to get a coach, I think a guy like Andrew Brokos a guy like you would be great. I mean, what are some of the methods that you employ from what you've learned in education and what you do in like your one-on-one sessions?
I will say, you know, I kind of benefit now from having so much of myself out there with the podcast and the blogs and the videos. I have very few people who come to me for coaching who aren't already familiar with the way that I think about poker and the way that I approach things. So, you know, I do feel like I'm not necessarily for everybody. It's a pretty it's kind of a theoretical or academic-y sort of way of looking at it, which not everyone is looking for. And I'm usually more focused on like talking about a lot of hands, or a few hands in depth more so than trying to talk about a bunch of hands at once. So it's nice to know that people have already sort of pre-selected themselves as people who are likely to respond well to my style of coaching. I do think one thing is just kind of not being patronizing to people who know a lot less than you do, or having some kind of common vocabulary where you can talk to them. Because I think there's a lot of people where the only people they're coaching are like other aspiring professionals or other people who are already professionals who are just trying to get a little bit better. And so you can dive right into talking in really theory-laden, jargon-heavy terms and assume that these people understand a lot of basic stuff about poker already. And I found recently a lot of my students and a lot of the students that I find the easiest or the most rewarding to work with are not professionals. You know, they're like pretty serious amateurs, maybe people who are moving into retirement. They're older people who want to spend a lot of time playing poker, maybe even drive a little bit of income from it, and they want to be good at it. And they want someone who can explain basic concepts to them as though they're not an idiot, because they're not dumb people. They're just not people who have studied poker. They're usually people who have had a lot of success in some other part of their lives. So I think being able to talk to people, just, you know, intelligent person to intelligent person, even if it's not great poker player to nearly great poker player, being able to have that sort of rapport with people or sort of meet people where they're coming from. And that's just one example of that. But I think that was the biggest thing that I learned from my education background, because I was working with people who had a very different background than I did there as well.
That's one of the hardest skills for me to learn. One of the hardest skills I'm still working on it, but definitely learned a lot over the years, is coaching widely different people, widely different skill sets, widely different ways of thinking. It's definitely very difficult. It just can't just be like one size fits all coaching session.
And everybody has different fears. That's the next problem. They have different fears, different things that hold them back. We recently talked to Elliot Rowe. I don't know if you know him, Andrew.
The hypnotherapist?
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about that.
Yeah, I know of him.
Yeah, and this is something that comes also into the coaching part that you do, Daryl does, and I do, is that, everybody comes from different parts of the planet. You know, everybody has different stories, different fears, and there's so many different things that come down. And if you just had one size fit all, like Daryl said, it'd be so awesome. But I guess not possible. Even in poker, not possible.
Yeah, and I do think to some extent there are people I'm well suited to work with and people I'm not. And as I said, it is nice that people have a lot of ways of seeing what my coaching is going to be like before we start working together. And it's been a long time since I've had someone where we just really weren't hitting it off and we ended up not working together.
Yeah.
How do you start off sessions with people? What's like the first thing you try and work on with people?
Often the first session is some sort of diagnostic. There'll be two things. I give people a worksheet to fill out ahead of time that has some information about the games that they're playing in and how long they've been playing poker, what their goals are, some stuff like that. And then I'll try to talk about. We'll try to talk through a specific hand, like one hand that I think represents a situation that comes up really often. or a variety of situations that come up really often. And what I'm really interested in is to see how do they think through certain situations. So like just watching a hand, like sometimes people will want to just send me a hand history and say like, hey, look at this and tell me what my leaks are. And I'm not saying I couldn't have some success doing that, but I don't think it's the best way of approaching things. I'm much more curious to hear how are people thinking through these situations. So I really want to talk to you about a hand, and even just one hand, I'll do it. It's not like I need to see a bunch of different examples of you playing. What I really want to hear is just how do you think about hand reading? How do you think about what you're trying to accomplish when you flopped a strong hand? What are you thinking in terms of getting value, or are you thinking in terms of, oh my God, how do I make sure I don't get sucked out on? There's a lot of stuff like that. I'm much more focused on thought process, I think, and because I mean, ultimately, looking at hands you've already played, you're not going to end up in those exact situations again. So the goal isn't really to figure out what you should have done in some hand that you've already played. It's to figure out what can I learn from this hand that I played before, so that I play other similar situations better in the future.
How do you get someone? I mean, I remember back then when I was talking to you and you gave me these things to fill out. And how do you get someone to really not be scared to talk about his thoughts there? Because people are not used to talk about what they are thinking within a poker hand or what they are thinking at any time. You know what I mean? And then you ask them this,
and that is something, when I talk about people kind of like pre-qualifying themselves to work with me or whatever, that is one of the trickier things. I think, some people don't really like, I mean, I ask a lot of questions. It's kind of like a Socratic thing. And, so I'll just say like, why did you do this? What were you thinking? And then I'll try to point out some inconsistencies in your thinking. So that's, can be uncomfortable for people to have you basically, someone who's better at poker than they are, judging and evaluating them and then saying like, look, here's what you're doing wrong. But the idea ultimately is for you to get to the point where you realize why it's wrong, rather than me just saying, no, you shouldn't raise there, you should fold, is for them to try to spell out what was your thinking behind raising, what are the assumptions that you're making. Now look, see how these assumptions don't actually add up, or they contradict each other or something like that. Sorry, I forgot what the question was.
No, basically, like how you basically get someone to
making
start
people
talking.
comfortable with that.
Yeah, making people comfortable, exactly.
I think again, it comes down to like not being patronizing about it, like making sure that people know that. I mean, partly reminding them like, this is I'm not assuming that like I know that we're looking at hands that are not the best hands you ever played. We'd be wasting your money if we looked at the best hand you ever played.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, pretty much everyone, the best hand they ever played is a top-notch hand. And if they could consistently play that well, they would be really successful players. So the problem is like, how do you help them play that well in a lot of other situations? So I will try to. And some people, you can kind of tell when people feel the need to like really explain away their mistakes, or they'll kind of apologize, or they'll say like, this hand doesn't really represent. I try to, when I find people making those kinds of justifications, I'll try to cut it and be like, look, I guarantee you, if you were to look through the worst hands that I ever played, you wouldn't want to hire me as a coach. Or if you were to assume that was representative of my play, you wouldn't want to hire me as a coach. So don't worry that I'm like evaluating you as a player based on this. Like, we're trying to find the things that you do least well. So it just kind of trying to put people at ease with that, or make sure they know that that's okay, or that's the whole point of what we're doing. But I mean, ultimately, I do think there are some people who just don't respond well to that, and those people at this point probably just aren't seeking me out for coaching.
We probably need to have like our own like separate discussion later, Andrew, because I keep wanting to ask you like these questions that only me and you would probably be interested in.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk sometime, Daryl.
I keep like having to hold myself back.
We asked Elliot Rowe basically why someone should think that he should hire him, although that person thinks that he is absolutely fine. So why should I hire you, although I think that I'm a good poker player? And I think I had that problem in October 2013, and you put me into so many situations where I thought, oh man, I don't understand poker. You basically, do you think that people who have a high ego, they cannot deal with that, and they would stop basically the coaching? Did that happen to you actually?
I can only really imagine one instance of someone. I don't even know if it was ego based or if it was more that he was very concerned about the cost of coaching or something, but it just kind of felt like, we did one, I offered that we could do kind of a free trial for the first session because I could tell that he was hesitant about it. And it's not often something I do, but I think for whatever reason at that time, I was a little slow on the coaching side or was just feeling generous or whatever. So we did a free trial and he did end up paying for it, which he didn't have to. And he wanted to do another session, but the second session too it felt more like a job interview than a coaching thing. He was like, it really felt like he was evaluating me pretty hard. And ultimately I was just like, look, I mean, you've seen, we've done 3 hours of coaching together now. You've seen what it's like. If you don't like it, that's fine. My feelings aren't going to be hurt, but like it's not doing anyone any good to keep going forwards like this. It's, you can either accept that I know what I'm talking about and we can talk about what you need to work on in poker, or you can keep trying to like find problems with me, but that latter is not going to help you any, I don't think, and it's certainly stressful for me. So
oh man, yeah, I mean, having someone who just accepts the fact that you're better than him like I did, I think is just so much making your job so much easier than someone who's fighting against it. Absolutely, it's just crazy. How long are you coaching for?
I was thinking about that. I guess it's probably been 5 years now, about that. I think I started, or no, that's even more than that. I think I started in 2008.
Okay, and your Thinking Poker website started around that time, or?
That Thinking Poker is even older.
Wow.
Thinking Poker started as my initial impetus for starting the blog. I mean, I like writing anyway, and as I said, I find it helpful to sort of process my thinking through writing. But it was a way of forcing me to review my sessions because at that time I played a lot, and I knew that I should be doing more, looking back over hands that I played or thinking about stuff. And I was always like, oh, I'd rather just play. Any time that I could be studying, I'd rather just play, or maybe watch a video, but not necessarily doing something that was real actively.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Improving my own game. So I thought, well, if I commit to setting up this blog, and I was a little bit known on 2+2. I'd written some stuff that people enjoyed on there. So I had some like poker friends and things. So I said, I'm going to put this thing up and sort of commit publicly that I'm going to post a hand after every session that I play. I'm going to pick at least one hand and post it and talk about it. And so, I mean, initially it was meant for my own edification first and foremost.
Did you get that idea yourself, or did you hear something about putting stuff publicly and forcing yourself to do something that would be beneficial to you? Sorry if
I don't recall.
Okay.
Whether I mean, I've certainly heard stuff about that since then. I don't know whether I heard it before I started doing that or not.
Because a lot of like very successful people in other areas, they say that one of the key things to success for them was to put stuff publicly, to tell everybody what they're doing, and that way they were forced to.
Right, and you're kind of afraid to fail at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or maybe not to fail, but at least to fail on trying.
Yeah, and I mean, you're telling
say,
everybody
if you say I'm going to make these posts every day, they don't have to be good hands. I could still fail in the sense of not playing well, but if I fail in the sense of not writing, like that's obviously just on me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you have some kind of routine to write things, or does it just whatever interests you write about? What does that look like?
I mean, I haven't really been doing as much of it lately. Now, I mean, the podcast has kind of taken over as my primary thing, and that's pretty time consuming to to line up guests and to record and do all that. And then doing the coaching, the blog has. I still try to post some content stuff, but increasingly the blog has gotten to be sort of like referring people to other stuff. So I'm writing for 2+2 magazine and sometimes for Poker News and making videos for TPE and all this sort of stuff. So a lot of times the blog is like a central repository where you can just go to see like what's the latest content from Andrew Brokos, like where is that available? And it's the blog is now not necessarily the number one play. I mean, I do still post hands on there from time to time or other strategy discussions, but a lot of times now it's more just sort of pointing towards other venues.
Okay, that's interesting. Is it going to continue like that with the podcast, or do you think about writing more articles in future? Because I really enjoyed your articles. I gotta admit, I didn't understand everything. It might be due to my English or something like that, but I really enjoyed your podcast. Like, I didn't listen to everything, but yeah. I mean, Daryl and me are highly interested in podcasts anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know both Nate and I are pretty interested in continuing with it. I know we don't have any plans to stop, but we also don't have any grand plan. Like, it's not like we have a 5-year plan for the podcast. So yeah, I mean it's hard to say, but right now it seems like people are enjoying it. It's certainly dollars per hour. It's the least valuable of stuff that I spend time on, but it's the most enjoyable, and it's not zero. Like we are making a little bit of money from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean I don't have any plans of discontinuing it.
Okay.
You were talking about studying earlier. Is there any way that you study or work on your game that's different than most people?
I mean, lately, a lot of it has been kind of game theory based. Like it's gotten increasingly theoretical, where I'm just sort of wondering like how, like increasingly I've been trying to approach poker like a puzzle, where at least one problem that I try to solve in any given situation, it's not even necessarily. I don't always end up taking a line that I think is balanced because, often I am trying to exploit somebody, but I still like to try to figure out what would a balanced range look like in this situation. So, if I wanted to, if I were playing against like a perfect poker playing computer, how would I want to play this situation? And then I can go from there and say, well, this particular opponent, do I know that he's too loose? Maybe I won't even bother with the bluffing side of things, or maybe I'll try to bluff him over multiple streets and benefit from his being too loose on this street, have that translated into fold equity on later streets. But I think there's a lot more situations. I mean, I think a lot of people are just kind of very dismissive of the whole idea of like balance, and they're just like, oh, I don't need to be balanced. Everyone I play against is so bad. But then they also post hands where they're like, I had no idea what to do here. And like that's exactly where game theory is useful, is those cases where you're like, I didn't know what to do, or they're like, see, I think he has top pair. Should I shove? Like, I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do with top pair. That's the whole point. Is if you just shove with a balanced range of like every hand better than top pair plus the right hands that are worse than top pair, it doesn't matter what he does with top pair. He's you win no matter what. And I think like that gives you, among other things, it gives you a lot of confidence. Like when you're I just don't get in that many situations anymore where I feel like I just made some like huge glaring error that was just like obviously stupid, and like I got absolutely soul read crushed no matter how good the people I'm playing against are, because I just like I have an idea of like how to avoid the absolute biggest mistakes, and not bluffing is one of those mistakes. So I mean, a lot of people think, well, if I play against a really great player, then I should never 3-bet that person light because he's going to see right through it. I can't mess around with him. I have to have the goods when I play with him.
Yeah.
And like that just, it makes you easier to play against when you do that kind of stuff. So like not bluffing enough is as big of a leak as not calling enough or not folding enough or anything else. Like it's just another part of the game. And so I think always thinking in terms of like, what's the best bluffing line here? Anytime you're value betting, saying to yourself, what hand, how would I balance this with a bluff? Anytime you're bluffing, saying, what hands would I value bet in this same way? There's kind of, you can get increasingly deep with it, but I think the first level is just sort of asking yourself, when I'm playing one sort of hand in a certain way, like either a monster or marginal or an air type hand, what other hands of a different type would I play in the same way? Making sure that you're doing at least that much, and then you can always get deeper into it. And a lot of what I do now is actually trying to like count combinations or work out over multiple streets. Like, am I building good ranges on the flop so that when the turn and river run out in this way, I still am capable of having a balanced range on the river? Like, you can get much more in depth with it, but I think even just taking that first step is a pretty significant first step.
Yeah, I think your first point is better, the one about even if you don't want to use balance, like even if you want to play exploitably for someone, you can't play properly exploitably unless you know where the balance point is. Like, right. All right, this is the point I deviate from, and then you account for your reads and you exploit from there. You know what I mean? Like, guy opens the cutoff, you have 30 bigs effective on the button. Like, I know exactly what a balanced 3-bet strategy here is in the spot. And now I know exactly how to deviate. Like, you can't deviate properly if you don't even know where the fucking starting point is.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people, like, their plan is just to guess in a lot of situations. And the more experienced they are, the better their guesses get. But ultimately, they're still just guessing.
Yeah, I mean, we had to. How long did we work on 3-betting? 3 months? 4 months?
Yep. Yeah, I know we spent more time on that than anything else, I think.
Yeah, and with Daryl the same. I think at least 3 months, right?
Yeah, we're getting back to it at some point too.
It's just so much you can learn about it, and a lot of people just think, you know what, I feel like 3-betting here, and then they're like, oh, it didn't work out.
Oh, I got pre-flop solved when it's like 99% empty tiers can get better at 0 to 10 big blind play, in my opinion, even like regs.
Yeah.
I really like the. I don't know if you guys have read Ed Miller's Poker's 1%.
Yeah, I started to read it, and I told Daryl about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so he kind of makes the case for, because a lot of the game theory books that are out there, like Mathematics of Poker in particular, is a really intense book. Like that's it's very intimidating to try to read that. And so one of the things I like about Ed's writing is, he does sacrifice a little bit of rigor. He's very sort of loose with his kind of throws around these numbers, like just do this about 70% of the time. But it's very easy to, or comparatively easy to understand and follow, and I think he gives some very good kind of common sense explanations for why this stuff is important. But the one thing that he says is, like, if you imagine a slot machine and the difference in payout, whether the slot machine is paying out 101% of what you put in or 99% of what you put in, which, obviously none of them pay out over 100, but that very small difference, like, you could play for a really long time without knowing which machine you were playing on. But in one machine you're winning and one machine you're losing. So getting those frequencies right, it's not necessarily something that you see. And I think that happens a lot with 3-betting, where people are like, oh, I just 3-bet any 2 cards here and he folded. I'm such a genius.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, he's going to fold a lot of times. It doesn't mean that you're making money with that 3-bet just because, like, you happen to run into his folding range. Or I really like that when, if you tank for a long time on a decision and then you fold and your opponent shows you a bluff, like it's going to tilt you. And I'm like, obviously I knew you were bluffing. Like, I knew that you were capable of bluffing there. That's why I was thinking, like, yeah. I wasn't trying to figure out, like, are you or are you not bluffing this time? I was trying to determine, like, exactly how wide your bluffing range is. So the fact that, like, you can show me one bluff that's not something that's going to get under my skin.
Yeah, I think most people need the Ed Miller approach to balance. I think there's a lot of, like, intuitive ways to incorporate balance. Like, there's ways that I think me and you would like, Andrew, where it's like we're counting exact combinations and stuff. But I think just asking the question is like, how can I be difficult to play against here? It's actually a pretty good question that doesn't lead to like a perfect strategy, but I think it's like a nice first step into learning how to play your range better. Like, how can I play my range here to be difficult? Like, so I'll get to a spot, I'm like, okay, what's your check back range here? And it's like, they tell me their hands, and it's like, it's all ace highs and like crappy hands. I'm like, okay, is that difficult to play against? No. Mm-hmm. All right. So how do we make that, difficult to play against here?
And also that second question of, is it at all useful to have a check back range in some situation? I think that's something that completely drives people crazy. At least it did when you asked me that. Is it good to have any check back range? Like, what do you mean?
That's something I've been thinking a lot about, is like whether, again, kind of like theoretical questions about, is this a situation where I should c-bet a lot, c-bet never, and just like try to check my whole range? Does it really make sense that, like, in theory you should be able to bet the flop every time that you raise pre-flop? Like, does one player's range necessarily have to be stronger than others? Like, things like that have been kind of interesting to me recently.
Yeah, another thing I do is I'll play heads up with people, and I'll just tell them what their range is and how I plan to exploit it. And they'll be like, oh, I guess I need to kind of like balance here. And me and Pedro did a lot of those sessions.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I learned it
when we first played heads up, and I was just like, all right, this is your range. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then he's like, we're in the middle of hand, and I'm talking about what I'm doing. He's like, oh.
Yeah. At the beginning, I was completely confused every single hand.
Now we play
and ultimately, that is the way to test whether you're balanced. Like, that's what they do. We just interviewed for the podcast the Computer Poker Research Group, the people who solved the heads up limit.
Oh, and when is it out? When will it be out?
It's out already.
Oh no! Oh my god!
It's the newest episode.
Okay, cool.
But the way, because some people are asking, like, well, how do you know that you have a perfect strategy? And the way that it should work, if you're truly balanced, is that even if your opponent knows your strategy, there's nothing they can do to beat you. So the way that they test this or prove this is they have another program that knows exactly how Cepheus, which is the bot that they built that plays so well, that it knows exactly how it plays. It knows exactly what it's going to do in every situation, but it doesn't know its cards. So then they see, how much can we beat this for? When we put this up against, it's called the nemesis. When we put it up against its nemesis, which knows exactly how it plays, it knows exactly what its strategy will be in every situation, how much can the nemesis beat it for? And right now they're losing 5/1000ths of a big blind to the nemesis per 100. So and like if we ran this, if we continued to let our program train for a few more months, that number would probably go down to 2,000ths of 100 or whatever. But that is like exactly what you're describing is what it should mean. If you're truly playing in a balanced way, then even if your opponent knows exactly what your strategy is, right? Like if you imagine rock, paper, scissors, you could just tell your opponent, look, I'm going to completely randomly, 1/3 of the time I choose rock, 1/3 I choose scissors, 1/3 I choose paper. You could tell them your strategy and there's nothing they could do. Whereas if you said, I'm going to choose rock every time, obviously, if that were true, if that were an accurate description of your strategy, it would be very obvious how to exploit you.
So interesting. Yeah. Do they try to also beat No Limit Hold'em?
Yeah, they do have a bot that plays heads up no limit. It's much harder.
Yeah.
Especially because the form of it that they play, there's no restriction of betting in multiples of anything. So like they could be playing 50-100 no limit, and they would still have the option of betting 100 or 101 or 102. So there's like a ton of different options that they have to be able to account for theoretically. So it's a much larger game.
Yeah.
So I think what they've said is that like they're pretty close to getting to a point where like they can beat a lot of people who are reasonably good at heads up no limit, including probably some professionals. But they're very far away from doing what they've done with limit, which is actually finding a solution where they're not reducing the game space at all. They're not they're not doing any kind of like approximations or little tricks to make the game a little bit simpler than it is. Like to actually be able to say this is truly a perfect way of playing. I think they're pretty far away from doing that with no limit.
That's scary. That really scares you.
Yeah, I mean, you can think of it as scary. I think it's kind of interesting too. Or I also just think it's inevitable. Like,
oh yeah, that's true. So someone's gonna fix. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it sort of is what it is. It's not it's just a fact, right? It's not necessarily something that I want to confront with an emotion of any kind, or that I feel like I need to have an opinion on, as much as it's just like this is it, like this is what's happening in poker, and you just have to take it for what it is.
I mean, yeah. As long as they still take a few years, I'm happy with it. as long as just take like 5 to 10
They
years.
solved limit a lot faster than they thought they were going to. Even because we interviewed them in May of last year, and they still thought they were a few years away from a solution for heads up limit, and then they kind of had a breakthrough that enabled them to solve it much more quickly. So again, like they're still talking about we're very far away from solving heads up no limit, but they are working on it, and it's always possible that they're going to have some sort of breakthrough that would result in them.
Yeah. So you just destroyed my wishes and dreams, basically.
I just want you to have more realistic wishes and dreams.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Good friend.
I wanted to come back to something that Daryl was saying earlier that I thought was real interesting, which is about making yourself hard to play against. Because I just drafted an article about this. I haven't even submitted it for publication yet, but because I think a lot of people are sort of. It's kind of hard to give people a goal in poker because you're like a lot of people want to win the pot, and that's not really the goal. And that's why people get frustrated when they get like pocket aces and don't end up winning the pot. So I was like, what should your goal really be? And I mean, to some extent, it's like, well, just play every hand as well as you can, but that's a pretty tough thing to evaluate. So I was like, I think maybe your goal should just be to have like your opponents scratching their heads a lot. So anytime that your opponent has like a very obvious decision, you've probably done something wrong. At least if they have an obvious decision with a certain part of their range. So like, I think a good example of this is, let's say you river the nuts and your opponent checks, and some people will think here, well, I have to make sure I get paid off, so I want to bet a small amount, or I want to make sure I suck him in, so I bet a small amount. And then their opponent quickly calls, and they end up winning. If the pot was already somewhat large, and then they get like another, even if it's only 40% of the pot paid on the river, they feel like they just won a pretty big pot. They feel good. And to me, the fact that my opponent very quickly called me, like, I'd rather be scratching my head and saying, it seems like maybe he would have called 60 or 70 or 80 or 120% of the pot. Like, I would, in some sense, I would rather see my opponent like tank for a long time and fold than I would like to see him snap call a bet of 40% of pot, because that makes me think I was actually, I missed my mark by a lot if he had a really quick call, versus, even if I missed my mark by the wrong side, like he ended up folding rather than calling, I was probably at least close to betting the right amount if he thought for a long time before he folded.
You guys use Snowy quite a bit, right? Doesn't Snowy want you to bet like 2x pot quite often on the river or something?
And I actually have been doing this a lot. As I understand it, the main time when Snowy bets 2x pot or close to that on the river is when that's enough to go all in. So what it likes to avoid doing, and I think this makes sense, is giving your opponent the option to check raise all in against you. So if you have like 1.8 pot left in your stack and you try to bet like 0.8 pot on the river, you're giving your opponent a new strategic option. You're giving him a choice. He could just play call or fold if he doesn't want to check raise, and that's fine. So but that's not going to be, he's not costing himself anything by doing that. Whereas you're giving him an option of check raising you, and that option should be worth, it can't be worth less than 0 if he plays well, because he can always just not take it if there's no opportunity for him to profitably check raise, he just won't do it. So, but if he plays well, then it should be worth something more than 0. So I think it's better to just have a shoving range on the river that's maybe a little bit wider and has more bluffs in it and is a larger bet, rather than trying to bet a small amount and then giving your opponent an option other than just call or fold. If he has a new option, he can call, fold, or check raise. Yeah. That should be better for him than just having call or fold as his only options.
But isn't giving him the chance to check raise sometimes very, very good?
Only if he's going to do it badly.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, I mean, if you think that maybe you have an opponent who's never going to check raise as a bluff, then okay, you can just bet and fold if he check raises, and that is true of a lot of people. So bet folding the river works pretty well against passive players, but I think when you're playing against better people, anytime you give them a choice, that's giving them a new tool that they can use to potentially teach you.
That's true.
Here's a more basic question. Should you teach GTO to every player? Or is there some regs that come to you and you're just let's work on hand reading first before we go to GTO, or should?
Oh yeah, I mean, I pretty much everything that I do is starting from hand reading, and I'm not often doing game theory stuff with a lot of my students. They're only in a very kind of elementary way.
When should someone go to GTO? Someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking about it. When should they do that? When should they focus on that instead of, just basic hand reading and shit like that?
I think to some extent, just if it's interesting to you. So, I mean, I have 2 students right now who are both math teachers. And so, both of them I have them reading Math of Poker right now because I think that it's going to be interesting for them. And Math of Poker does kind of teach you a lot about what good poker should look like also. It's not 100% about game theory. I don't think that's the only thing that you can take away from it. But I think that for some people it's just not interesting or helpful for them to start off thinking in those terms. So for those people, it's sort of when you're at the point where you're playing against very tough opponents, or you're routinely playing against people who are better than you are, or at least very good, and that stuff starts to matter more from a practical standpoint, then it becomes important.
All right. Backtracking maybe a bit more, do you think it's more important for someone listening to this podcast to work on their short stack game, 0 to 20 big blinds, or hand reading first, or should they just do both simultaneously?
I mean,
nobody knows what to work on. There's so much shit to work on.
I mean, if you're coming to me, we're going to work on the hand reading because that's what I'm better at. And I figure if what you really need to work on is 20 big blind play, I'm probably not the first person you want to come to for coaching. I think there are other people who probably know that stuff better. So I mean, I definitely consider hand reading something that I'm better qualified to teach.
So basically, if someone, that hand reading is related to your poker goals. Is that safe to say? If you have the poker goal to play, for example, only turbo MTTs, I guess hand reading is less useful.
Yes.
And so basically, it really helps your poker goals, right? To basically talk about hand reading a lot. You play cash games also a lot more now.
I play mostly cash right now.
Yeah. And that's 100 big blind.
When I do play tournaments, I don't really enjoy playing turbos that much. And I do kind of find when I hear Daryl say I basically have 20 big blind poker solved, I'm envious of that. So I don't consider that my like biggest strength.
I did not say 20 big blind poker solved.
He's trying to. He's trying. But do you not play T-Coop at all? Is that like a series where even if you had PokerStars in the United States, you would say, okay, I'm just gonna skip it?
I'm sure I would play if I were like if I could just like sit down right now and play it. I'm sure I would, but it's not one that I have traveled internationally for.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even have 10 big blind solved. I'm just really bad at big blinds.
Okay, so I guess I misquoted you.
I don't even know how these cap players do it. I mean, they play 20 big blind cash games, and they just do so many, like Wizard of Oz. He just does.
True Teller.
Who?
True Teller?
True.
I think that's what his name is. He crushes like W coops as well. He has like a 6 or 7 big blind win rate at cap games or something.
Wow. That's insane. How do these guys do that? And I mean, Wizard of Oz won like 500K pre-rake back in a year in cap games. Like, how do you do that? That's crazy. I don't know. These guys are so smart.
Do you know him personally? Have you talked to him?
No. I know a guy, a good friend of mine. He got coached by him.
Yeah, I think he would probably be a good candidate for your show. Actually,
he's not playing poker anymore. He now opened up a business, and he's making like 5 times more money than in poker. So I mean, this guy made like.
Nonetheless, he'd probably be interested in talking to you.
Oh man, yeah, like he's a super nice guy. He had that disease, and after that, everything went pretty well for him. Basically, after he beat it.
Lyme disease.
Lyme disease, yeah, exactly. And man, super happy for him. That's a crazy thing.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He and I actually, we were on Team Online at the same time, and we ended up moving to the same, like, small resort town in Canada. Like, shortly after Black Friday, we both went there for a few months, which was, so I kind of got to know him because, like, we hung out sometimes out there. Because, like, I mean, like, a lot of poker players went to Toronto or Vancouver or Playa del Carmen, and they sort of built their own communities there. But he and I were the only two in Canmore. So,
man, but his house looks sick.
I don't know what his house is now, but he had a really crazy place in Canada for a while.
Yeah, at a lake.
But it was, I mean, right? It was also the amount of money that he was paying for it was pretty sick.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I mean, I guess he just wasn't that concerned about it, but yeah, I spent a night in the one place that he had. It was pretty boss.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is that crazy traveling. At least for me, it sounds crazy to travel for online poker. And you still play a lot of live, or like, do you have a schedule where you play? You have a routine weekly or something?
No, and I've just moved to San Francisco pretty recently, and I've only been to the poker room out there once since I was in San Francisco. And part of that was just being busy from like.
Pedro would really disapprove of your move. It's like 10 to 15% state tax. Rich, most expensive place in America, almost.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was entirely based on my girlfriend got a job out there, so having a second income sort of trumped all of those other considerations.
It's like a very cool place to live. So.
Yeah, but I've actually kind of ended up getting stuck on the East Coast. I had a couple of family things come up, so I'm actually coming to you from the Baltimore area right now, and I've been here for a few weeks. Basically, I was here for Christmas and like around Christmas time for about 2 weeks. Flew back to San Francisco, was there for about 24 hours, and then got some news that caused me to need to come back to Baltimore, and I've been here for a couple of weeks now. Okay. But the upside of that is that I'm very close to Maryland Live, which is they have a pretty great poker room there. It's a casino that's been open for a little over a year, I think.
Okay.
And so I've been playing a lot of live poker recently, just sort of because I'm here and I don't have a whole lot else to do.
Well, you have a podcast now. You can focus 110% now.
Yeah, I've actually been doing less on the podcast.
Okay, but do you have any plans to play Scoop or W Coop?
I most likely will. I don't have plans in the sense of like I haven't reserved a place or purchased flights or anything like that.
Come to Portugal.
W Coop is. The time is so bad though. I really benefit from like I don't want to be starting a tournament at like even like 2 p.m. is late for me really.
Oh, okay. No, here it starts.
So it's
it's
been
5.
so nice. Yeah, see that's much too late for me.
Okay.
It's so nice. Even the East Coast of the U.S., but the West Coast might be better. Like if I can start playing at 6, 7, 8 in the morning, that's pretty nice for me. Probably like 8 or 9 is ideal, but I'd much rather start at 6 a.m. than start at 2 or 3 p.m.
There's no
And
chance
I know that
you
makes
could
me
get me
very
out of
weird.
bed at 6 a.m. No chance.
I know that makes me very weird for a poker player, but it's not even close.
Okay.
Yeah, I would probably like that too. I wake up at like 7 a.m. I have 2
Yeah, well,
kids.
you've got kids,
That's
right?
cool.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah, I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know if I would like the tail end of my session ending at like 3, 4 p.m. though, because I find like it's the time where I think most people kind of get tired, and like that's where like the highest equity spots are, I
that's
think.
interesting.
Okay. I mean, for me, all I can say is that I highly enjoy going to the gym before I play. Like I like to have like 4 or 5 hours of time where I can just see my family, relax, and all that stuff. If I would have to play at 6 a.m. or even let's say at 9 a.m. without seeing my family, like going to the gym, spending like a nice breakfast with my girlfriend, I think I would not be balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, for me, like because I'm traveling specifically to play these events, I'm really just focused on the poker when I'm there. So like when I go to Montreal, which is where I've been going recently anyway. Now that I'm on the West Coast, I might go somewhere else. But when I go to Montreal, it's just like the poker is really the only thing that I'm like thinking about or trying to do during the time that I'm there. And my girlfriend's not with me. I have 1 or 2 friends who live out there, but for the most part, I'm just kind of like in an apartment by myself for 2 to 3 weeks and sort of laser focused on the poker, and then everything else is sort of built around that. So yeah, it's nice if I have time to go for a little bit of a bike ride in the morning before I start playing or something like that. And they have a nice like bike share program in Montreal where you can do that pretty easily. But it also works out nicely if I finish, in time that I can like make myself a nice meal for dinner. And usually I'll make something that I can do in bulk and get like 4 meals out of it, and then have some leftovers for future days. And I don't know, I kind of like having time to unwind in the evening more so than time to like gear up in the morning, I guess.
Have you tried I think it's called Romados out there?
No,
Romados or something like that?
I'm mostly preparing my own meals more so than going out.
Okay, they like grill or bake chicken, and it's like the best chicken ever. Next time you're out there, you have to try
Oh yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Actually, my friend who's out there is half Portuguese, and I think if this is the place I'm thinking of, it's a Portuguese place.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, yeah, my friend who's out there is like French and Portuguese. So he's mentioned this place to me before, but I'm actually a vegetarian, so
Oh, okay. That makes it hard to eat there.
yeah, Montreal is although they are famous for a lot of food, most of the stuff they're famous for is not vegetarian friendly.
I
Animals taste so good though, man.
what about your?
I'm think
Sorry.
I'm thinking about going like 80% vegetarian, like 20% meat. I don't think I could give it up completely, to be honest.
Hmm. Why though? Because of the health aspect of the stuff that's in the meat.
Yeah, I mean, I think animal protein's pretty good for you, right?
Yeah.
There are definitely people who would disagree with that. Health is not really my primary concern here, but I don't think it would be hard for me to point you towards people who would say that animal protein is in fact very bad for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of people do that actually. Do say that. And I mean, a lot of like professional fighters and like body like gym. Oh man, weightlifters. They actually really don't eat any protein, like from chicken, raw meat, nothing at all. And they only eat that. What do they use actually? Like a powder, right? Like a protein.
like whey protein
Yeah,
or
like
something
whey
like that.
protein and stuff like that. Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah, I mean that's like a lot of people's reaction when you say you're a vegetarian is like, oh, where do you get protein from? And like that's the least of your concerns. Like there's plenty of like beans, quinoa, lentils,
yeah.
like all that sort of stuff. There's plenty of protein in those. Like that's not really an issue.
Exactly. I mean, those fighters, I mean, they have, if you look at them, you would, for example, a lot of people, they think of vegetarians as super slim. They don't have any muscles, they look like nerds, for example. But man, when you look at these fighters, man, they just kill you. It's like
Most
seriously.
UFC guys aren't vegetarian though, or vegan.
What?
I would.
Say it again?
I think most UFC guys aren't vegetarian or vegan though.
Oh, yeah, I
I
know,
know,
I
but there
know.
there are a few who are. Like basically, it's like
Exactly.
it's definitely possible to do that.
Yeah,
Exactly, it's possible for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
But you have to be a lot more strict on your diet. That's the harder part, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah,
I'm actually going to have to run, guys.
Oh yeah, sure, man. Thanks a lot for your time. Time
It was a
flew.
pleasure talking to you. I'm sorry I have to cut it off.
No problem, man. Sorry for that. So, thank you very much for your time. And I guess you two guys are going to talk later about that stuff that only you two are interested in.
I might record it and see if we find some use for it. But yeah, I
Awesome.
would enjoy talking to you sometime, Daryl.
Okay, man.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you want to like throw up a time or something like that, definitely be cool.
Yeah, I think I kind of hinted I have a lot of stuff going on just
Yep,
at the second.
exactly.
But yeah, I mean maybe as soon as next month.
Yeah, sounds cool.
Okay, man. Have a nice day.
All right, take care,
See you.
guys. Have a
Bye.
good one.
Yep, see ya.
Yo. Hello?
Yep.
Oops. 1 second.
Oh.